So, Shabbat Shalom. We started out great for another hard talk. Who's been enjoying the hard teachings? Yeah, it's good. We like to get into stuff that's deeper, go a little bit past the surface. Um, One of the issues that we all struggle with, and that's really important that we watch out for, is pride. I'm calling it spiritual pride. We'll dig into my definition of that, and hopefully a biblical definition. Pride is it's something that we're all subject to. It's in our fallen human nature. And so it's not something that only afflicts some of us. And pride comes in a lot of forms. It's a tricky one. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about spiritual pride, meaning when we put ourselves in a special class or a special grouping, it might just be me by myself, or it might be us in this room, or whatever grouping that we choose, and we decide that we're spiritually better off than other people, and therefore we look down on other people, and we, of course, exalt ourselves and our own thinking. This is the opposite of what we're called to in Yeshua, in the Messiah. We're called to reject our own thinking and reject reliance on ourselves and to trust in Him. And spiritual pride is the opposite of that. It's when we put our trust in ourselves, maybe in our knowledge, maybe in our, whatever, some characteristic that we perceive about ourselves or that we think that we have. And so I wanted to start with one of Yeshua's teachings, an interesting one, maybe one of the deepest ones I'm aware of, one that you can meditate on a lot for a lot of subjects, especially the whole question of why is there suffering in the world? Why is there evil in the world? A lot of times when we ask that question, we don't ask it honestly. We ask it to justify ourselves, and there's the spiritual pride coming in. And so some people came up to Yeshua, and they pointed out to him this terrible thing that had happened, this travesty, this calamity. They said, look, there's men from the Galil who Pilate slaughtered them, even while they were sacrificing. So they're trying to do, the most holy act of worship that a person could do at that time. They're trying to sacrifice, make a sacrifice to Adonai. And of course, this is not something that you would just do for the fun of it. This is something that you would do with reverence and something that you would do to honor the Lord. When you were sacrificing your animals, we don't think about this, but people lived on those animals. That's how they survived. And so you were actually giving something that you needed to live over to the Lord. You were giving a piece of your life, of your sustenance to Adonai. And so they were doing this. They were in this act of worship, in this act of sacrifice. And in the midst of that, this evil ruler had these people slaughtered. And so these people came to Yeshua like, hey, Yeshua, you're supposed to be the Mashiach, right? You're supposed to be the anointed one, the one who frees us from our enemies, the one who will reign from Jerusalem. So maybe we should point out to you that some really bad things are happening in the world around us and around you. And we're a little bit surprised that you're not taking note. And so they go up to him and they're like, Yeshua, what's up with these guys over here? They were in the middle of worshiping, in the middle of sacrificing, and they got slaughtered by Pilate. And so what does Yeshua say? What's his response? This is the response of the Messiah. He says, do you think that just because they died so horribly, these folks from the Galil were worse sinners than all the others from the Galil? So he answers the question with a question. Very Jewish thing to do. And so they ask him a question, and he gets them a question back. So his question to them is, are you imagining in your mind that these people are somehow worse than the people that didn't befall the same calamity? Right? So this terrible thing happened to these people, but what about the people around them? What about everybody else in that area? Why are they better people? Right? You're starting to see how we think just like this? We look at the person next to him, oh, okay, I'm better off than that person, so I must be more spiritual, right? Or I'm worse off than that person, so, woe is me. I need a pity party. But all of these evaluations, they come from our old nature. They're not according to God's word and to his truth. And so Yeshua says, no, I tell you. So now he gives the answer. Let's just think about it. Rather, unless you turn to Elohim from your sins, you're going to die like they did. Whoa. Well, that kind of turns it around, right? He turned the tables there. Wait 1 second. We're trying to complain about an injustice, and he's saying, no, the injustice is wrong. You've misunderstood the injustice that God's allowing in the world. Whoa. Whoa, right? There goes our pride. We go to him and say, God, how can there be suffering in the world? If you're a loving God, if you're good, how can you allow these terrible things to happen in your world? And you know what he says? Oh, do you think that you're better than everybody else that these terrible things have happened to? No. If you don't receive my grace, you're going to be just as bad off. In fact, you're going to be worse off. Everyone. Everybody deserves much worse. When Yeshua says you will die as they did, he uses the word perish, destroyed forever. He's referring to something eternal. He's referring to something far beyond just breathing and not breathing in this life. And then they had the same question about the Tower of Shiloach. And he said, so Yeshua asked them, what about these guys? So now he's going to show them his own example. He said, these people that the Tower of Shiloach fell on them, these 18 people that died, something that was in the collective memory. He said, do you think they were worse offenders? Literally, he used the word debtor. Are they worse debtors? Do they owe something more than all the other people living in Yerushalayim? And then he just answers his own question. No, I tell you. Rather, unless you turn from your sins, you will all die in the same way. That's his response to our spiritual pride. And then Yeshua gave an illustration. Now he wants to drive the point home. So he tells them a parable to show what's going on. And he says this. He says, a man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit, but didn't find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, here, I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree for 3 years now without finding any. So what's he going to do? He's planting this plant. He's caring for this plant. It's been 3 years. He's expecting some fruit. He's not finding any fruit. So what's he going to do about it? Cut it down. Cut it down. It's taking up space. Cut it down. Why let it go using up the soil? But he, the other man, answered, Sir, or Lord, leave it alone 1 more year. I'll dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. If not, cut it down then. You see what's going on here? You see what Yeshua just did with the question? Why do bad things happen to good people? Like, that's the way we like to phrase it. The phraseology already shows our heart. It already reveals the deception of our heart. Who here is good in and of themselves? Yeah, none of us. None of us. So when we ask a question like that, we're leading the witness, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? No, why do good things happen to terrible people? People who are condemned to eternal damnation. That's the question we should be answering. So Yeshua asked that question. He turns it around to them and says, look, the question is not that bad things happen to good people. The question is, why do I put up with any of you? That's what he just did here. He just turned the tables. Now he's saying, hey, to you asking the question, is there fruit of repentance in your life? You see what he just did? Okay, you came to me, and what your question revealed is a heart of spiritual pride. You think you're asking a legitimate question. You think that you're complaining and you're upset about a legitimate injustice. But you're not. It's just a justification for our own sin, for our own lack of fruit. We come to the Lord like, oh, how can this horrible stuff happen in the world? But is that really the reality? No. If the Lord really gave all of us what we all deserve right now, who would be here? Nobody. And so the fact that we're here means that we're all recipients of his grace. Whether you trust in him or not, you can be an atheist. If you're here and you're breathing, you've gotten a lot more than you deserve. That's what Yeshua is saying. So he's turning the tables on our spiritual pride. He's saying, wait, the problem's not with me, right? Now, he will fix everything. I'm not denying that. In his own time. But he wants us to put our trust in him and to produce fruit. Rav Shaul says it this way. He explains this spiritual process like this. He said, you used to be dead. So how did we start out? Dead. Spiritually dead. Because of your sins and acts of disobedience. You walked in the ways of the Olam Hazeh, this present age, and you obeyed the ruler of the powers of the air, who still is at work among the disobedient. So he said, look, everything that's wrong with the world, that was you. That was me. If we haven't repented, it still is, but he's assuming here that we've repented. So that's the starting point. Indeed, we all once lived this way. We followed the passions or the desires of our old nature, and we obeyed the wishes of our old nature and our own thoughts. See that? That's the definition of spiritual pride. We do whatever we want, right? That means that we're the one exalted to the position of the divine, and we've lowered God down to either our level or below. We don't have to do what he says. We can just do what we want. And so he said, we've all done that. And we were all doing that. He said, in our natural condition, we were headed for what? God's wrath. Not happy with that. He's not okay with that. That's where we were headed. Now, how would we save ourselves from that? Yeah, we can't, right? The answer is that we have no way to save ourselves. And he says, just like everyone else. There's the level playing field. The field is level, but it's not level because we're all okay and then a few people have suffered something terrible, some injustice. No, the field is level because we're all headed for God's wrath. We all deserve it. We can deny it, but it's just our pride. It's just deception. We deserve it. This is the state of all human beings. And then he says, but Elohim. So the one that saves, the one that initiates, the one that should be praised is not us. There's nothing we can do about that. But he says, but God is so rich in mercy and loves us with such intense love, even when we were dead because of our acts of disobedience, he brought us to life along with the Messiah. Now, Shaul's using this word picture of death and resurrection very deliberately. Can a dead person undead themselves? No. And that's why he's using this as the picture to describe the way we were versus the way we are. If you were dead and now you're not dead, then you are not the answer. You are not the one that made that happen. Because dead people don't undead themselves. You can't undo the damage. Right? Some external force, and a miraculous one at that, would have to work on you. And that's what God did. And so he brought us to life along with the Messiah. It is by grace. Grace can be understood, charis in Greek, to encapsulate the idea of both chen in Hebrew, which is favor, and chesed, which is loving kindness, in one word. So he says that by chen and chesed, by grace, by charis, you have been delivered. You've been delivered from what? What have we been delivered from? Death is one thing. What else? Sin. Sin's another thing. What else? God's wrath, right? All of those things that he just described. Everything that he just said that you were dead in, we've been delivered from that. But who did the delivering? Yeah, exactly. It wasn't us. He says, that is, God raised us up with the Messiah Yeshua and seated us with him in heaven in order to exhibit in the ages to come how infinitely rich is his grace, how great is his kindness towards us who are united with Messiah Yeshua. So if we're in Messiah Yeshua, if we're united with him, then in the same way that he died and the Father raised him back from the dead, we also were dead and we've been raised to life. Do you get the picture? Amen. In other words, the death that he died so that we don't have to stay dead. And the life that he lives, we now get to live with him and in him, in union with him. That's the good news. That's the Besorah. But here's the thing. Where's the place for boasting in that? There's no place. There's no room for spiritual pride. If we get this, if we actually put our trust in this and we believe this, there's no room for spiritual pride. There's no place that I can say, hey, I'm better than you. I'm somehow better off than you. I'm somehow more favored than you. That doesn't make sense. I was dead. If I'm alive, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with him. And so all I can do is be really humble, right? Before him and before you. And that's the way that we're supposed to live. He says, for you have been delivered by grace through trusting. And even this is not your accomplishment. So I can't even say, but I heard the good news and I put my trust in it, so I'm a good person. No. He said, even that was a gift. Even that came from him. You were not delivered by your own actions. He tries to make this very clear. He's trying to explain to us because he knows that we have this problem. It's in our hearts. Therefore, no one should boast. It's explicit, right? It's very, very clear. He tries to give you all the reasons that you can't boast and that I can't boast. It's not, you can't make yourself alive. If you responded to the good news, it's because of his grace. It's because of his love. It's because of his gift. So why are you proud? Why are you boasting in yourself as if you had done this? Right? It's like the dog that barks and then the mailman goes away and the dog thinks, I scared him off, right? We're like that. Every day the mailman comes and we ruff, and the mailman walks away like, hey, look at me, right? We've got Chihuahua syndrome going on spiritually. He said, that makes no sense. Where's the place to boast? Everything that you have, he's the one who did it. He's the one who gave it to you. For we are God's making, created in union with the Messiah, Yeshua, for a life of good actions that God already prepared beforehand for us to do. So is he saying that we need to produce fruit? Yes. But is he saying that if we produce fruit, that we're therefore, we can look to ourselves and say, hey, I have a boast? No, because who created the fruit? Sure. Yeah, this was already God's creation. He already decided this. He already prepared this. If we walk in it, we're just doing what we're supposed to do. Right? When someone does what they're supposed to do, you don't get a medal of commendation for that, right? When someone does something heroic, what does everyone say? Hey, you didn't have to do that, right? You didn't have to do that. Maybe you ran into the burning building and pulled someone out. Say, wow, everybody was leaving the building. That's the instructions, right? The fire alarm goes off, and you leave the building. But this one turned around and went there and rescued someone. So then you get a medal of commendation. You don't get a medal to everybody who left the building, right? Oh, you left the building. Here you go. Here's your medal. You're a hero. Oh, yeah. I walked down the stairs, right? What? No, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you do. If you don't do it, you might not be around, right? We're not spiritual heroes. A lot of times we think we are, and it's very dangerous. It's where our judgment comes from. Our judgment comes from our heart, so we need to watch by our attitudes and our words, especially towards other people, what our heart is actually saying, what it's showing, because it reveals what's in there. Now, there's a lot of abuse of these scriptures. I'm aware of the abuse. We can talk about the abuse of these things. There's people who will say something like this. They'll live in open sin, and they'll say, oh, don't judge me. Don't judge me. Don't say anything about it. You have to just accept me doing what I'm doing the way I am. Otherwise, you're judging. No, it's not what it says here. What he's saying is, don't condemn someone because you yourself would be condemned by whatever measure you could possibly measure out. He's not saying that we don't have to produce fruit. He's not saying that we don't have to hold each other accountable to do God's will. He's not even talking about that. That's not the subject at hand. What he's saying is that any judgment, any condemnation that we focus on somebody else, whatever the measurement that we could use the Torah, we could use my personal ethics, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, we don't meet our own bar. Who here's noticed that about human beings? Isn't it true? We don't meet our own bar. Whatever bar it is that makes us upset about people around us, and we go, that person, they're always doing blah, blah, blah. Guess what? How many of us could, if we looked in the mirror, we go, there was a time I did the same thing, or I'm going to do it tomorrow, right? All of us. We don't meet our own bar. So that we have no place of position to see ourselves looking down at somebody. Who can we look down upon? Nobody. All we can do is look up to Yeshua. He's the only one that's going to save us. And so this is what he says. He said, don't judge. This is Yeshua speaking, so that you won't be judged. For the way you judge others is how you will be judged. The measure with which you measure out will be measured back to you. Ah, interesting. Well, and the wisdom of Yeshua is that he always turns the table on us. The reason we want to throw our pearls before swine is because that's a way that we exalt ourselves. Right? This is our human nature. This is our fallen nature. Is that we look for someone who's got a weakness and we go, oh, I don't have that weakness, or I don't have it as much as you, so therefore, I'm better than you. Right? That's our pride. And so Yeshua just nixes that. He's like, that's foolish. That's nonsense. You're basically just creating a straw man, and then you're blowing it up and saying, oh, look at what I did. Right? Our spiritual straw man. We find someone who's in a horrible position spiritually. We say mean things to them and we pretend like we're proclaiming the good news. Then when they don't want to listen to us, we go, oh, they don't listen to us, right? I'm such a martyr. I'm like one of the prophets. And it's not true. The problem is right here. The problem is my heart. The problem is my attitude. The problem is that instead of loving people and knowing that only Yeshua can draw them in, but I can repel them, right? I need to represent him. I need to let him live through me, so that people can experience his love, experience his truth, and experience the freedom that he gives. I become the impediment because I'm proud. I'm judgmental. I'm looking down on people and saying, they don't live up to my standard. And of course, our standards are arbitrary. They shift, right? They shift all the time, especially like when we apply them to ourselves, they go lower, right? One of the things that Rabbi David Schiller always points out, I think is amazing, is he said that we judge other people by their actions, and we judge ourselves by our intentions. And that's so true. It's so true. I didn't mean to do that. But we don't give other people the benefit of that doubt. We don't even know what they meant to do. We can only see what they actually did, right? And we're like, oh, look at what that person did. How many times do we go, let's give them the benefit of the doubt? We give ourselves the benefit of the doubt every single time, right? But then when we judge, we change the measurement. And we dish it out with a measurement that we wouldn't be able to take ourselves. And so therefore we end up condemned. People were putting their trust in Yeshua as he would go around and teach. And so he was in the Judean area, and he's preaching, he's teaching, he's proclaiming the good news, he's giving all kinds of amazing teachings. And people are starting to follow him. The local Judean population, they're following him. They're putting their trust in him. They realize that there's something special there. This man's more than a man. He's doing things that no one else can do. He's saying things that nobody else would even put together. And so they start to follow them. And so Yeshua said to the Judeans who were following him, who had trusted him, if you obey what I say, then you are really my disciples. So he starts to get real with them. Like just the fact that you're walking around giving some kind of mental assent to what I'm saying is not enough. You're going to have to actually obey what I'm telling you. And so he says this, you will know the truth. This is something you're going to come to know. You're going to come to experience the truth. Knowing, having da'at, this idea of knowing, is something that's experiential. It goes beyond just knowing. It's knowing. Adam knew Eve, and she bore him a son. So he's saying you're going to know the truth. You're going to become intimate with the truth. And the truth is going to set you free. And it's interesting how they responded. They responded very much the way that we oftentimes respond to these kind of challenges to our spiritual pride. We go, I don't have that problem. Right? That's how we respond all the time. Watch ourselves. You'll see it. We do it all the time. And so they answered, they said some of the most amazing words that have ever been uttered to the creator of the universe. They said this, we are the seed of Abraham. Now, if you're familiar with Torah, you know the idea of the seed of Abraham. This is a concept from the Torah. So they're pointing to the Torah and they're saying, hey, based on the Torah, we're special. We're special because the Torah says we're special. And we've never been slaves to anyone. I wonder what they celebrate once a year in the springtime. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? But this is what we do in our spiritual pride. We don't see it. We become blind. It should be obvious. Everybody else sees it, but we don't see it. They see no irony in appealing to the Torah, which said that they spent 400 years as slaves to Pharaoh. They have no problem appealing to that and say, hey, because of that book, because of what it says, we're cool. We don't actually need what you're selling right now. We're not going to buy. We don't need it. We're good. And so Yeshua says, he answered and said, yes, indeed. I tell you that everyone who practices sin is a slave of sin. He just cuts right to the chase here. He doesn't even go into history. He doesn't try to miss the point. He wants them to realize, no, I'm not even talking about your ancestors. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. This is who he's talking about. He's talking to us directly. So he's not even going to let us, shift the, oh, look at over there. There's a problem over there, but I'm okay. No. If you have committed sin, if you practice sin, then you're a slave of sin. He says, look, a slave doesn't remain in the family forever. He's going back to Torah. There was a year of Jubilee. The slave didn't stay forever. But a son does remain forever. So do you want the inheritance? Are you a son? Or are you just hanging out as a slave? Here for a while, do a little work, clean up the mess, and then you're gone. You're on your way. And so they just went from being seed of Abraham to being slaves who have no permanent inheritance. And that's the reality of who we are. That's the reality of all of us. That's what we just read in Ephesians 2. In Hebrews, the writer says this: if you disregard Torah, you disregard Moshe, if there's 2 witnesses, 3 witnesses, you can be put to death. You can be completely condemned. They don't even have to be right. You realize that, right? The witnesses could be lying. That's why one of the 10 is do not bear false testimony. Doesn't matter. We don't know if they're lying. If there's not some obvious contradiction that we can point out, we have to go, if they're legitimate witnesses, they can pass that bar, we're condemned. Without mercy. When you see the Torah and you see the commandments and you see the way that justice is meted out, there's not really any space for mercy. There's not really any place where someone can say, but, I'm going to give you some leniency here. No, the witnesses, if they're considered legitimate witnesses and they agree that you did this thing and it's a capital offense, you're condemned. Very simple. That's the way it works. But it's so good that we have the New Testament, right? Now we can relax in our spiritual pride. Really, we're better than everybody else if we think about it, right? Is that what it says? No. It says, think how much worse will be the punishment deserved by someone who is trampled underfoot Ben Elohim, the Son of God, who is treated as something common, the blood of the Brit, the covenant, which made him holy, and who has insulted the Ruach, the Spirit, the giver of God's grace. Oh. There's no room for spiritual pride. The Brit Chadashah, the new covenant, doesn't give us more room to feel proud of ourselves. It actually eliminates any space for our spiritual pride. There's no room at all. If we come and we look at somebody and we think, I'm sure glad that God didn't make me like that person. Or we think, wow, I thought my life was bad, but now it's not that bad. We don't realize how bad it really is in our hearts. We don't realize what Yeshua has done for us. See, when we exalt ourselves, all we're doing is bringing him and his sacrifice lower to the ground. That's all we're doing. We're insulting, we're treating as common, we're trampling underfoot his work. There's no other way about it, because none of us deserve to be here. None of us deserve to have the breath of life. None of us deserve to have an eternal hope. Chayei olam. life everlasting. None of us deserve it. I don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. And I'm not going to start deserving it. If I produce the fruit that I'm supposed to, then that's good. Then I don't get the axe. If I don't, then that's a problem. Something went wrong. Right? There's not a point at which we can say, okay, well now I can be, really steadfast on my own efforts. Now I'm the man. Never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So the only place is a place of humility, a place of reliance and dependence on him. It's not that we were dependent on him. It's that we are dependent on him. And for everything. You take a breath, right? A breath. You know what the word breath is in Hebrew? Ruach. Yeah, exactly. He's the one. It's his ruach that gives us life. It's his ruach that gives us grace. That's how we access it. So if we're accessing his grace, who's sustaining us? And who's giving it? Yeah, him. It's not that it's complex. The truth is often simple. It's that we lead ourselves into deception because we don't want it to be the case, right? So it's not that, I just can't understand it. It goes beyond my comprehension. I think the vast majority of people do understand this. But I think that we ignore it all the time conveniently. And it's really important in the time that we're in right now. We're in a time of, we're in an election season in the United States. I think we're still in Pride Month, in the United States as well, probably all over the world. We've got all this stuff going on, and this is a time for us to be really, really humble. Really humble. And it doesn't mean that we can't be strong about things. It doesn't mean that we can't have beliefs that are solid. But we should have lots of humility, lots of compassion, lots of love for other people. We should be giving a lot of people the benefit of the doubt, understanding that they can't see what they can't see. Blind eyes don't see. Right? Are we poking people in their blind eyes? Or are we leading them to the truth? And that's the difference of what happens if we're spiritually proud or if we realize, I don't deserve what I have. So you don't need to live up to something that I couldn't live up to, right? For me to stretch out my hands to you in compassion, bring the good news to you. I'm not responsible for the end goal of what I look like or you look like. Who prepared beforehand the good works that we're supposed to walk in? He did, right? He's the one responsible. And he's the one who will judge, by the way. Everybody will stand before him. We will give an account. He says this, I believe this is in Peter, right? Yeah, 1 Peter. He says this, therefore, get your minds ready for work. Keep yourselves under control and fix your hopes fully on the gift you will receive when Yeshua the Messiah is revealed. So this is interesting. Even though we have already been delivered in Messiah Yeshua, right? He's already given us the first fruits of our inheritance, the Holy Spirit. But we're supposed to fix our hope completely, fully, totally on what's to come. That will keep us from relying on ourselves, right? If all of our hope is in something that the Lord's going to do, then how much of our hope is in what's going on right now? Nothing. There's nothing left to hope in here. And we're not supposed to be putting our hope in here. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't make plans. This doesn't mean that we don't live life and experience life in the present time. We do. We see Yeshua when his friend Lazarus died. What did Yeshua do? He cried. He was living life in the now. We're not supposed to be, weird and pretend that life isn't happening. No, but our hope, what it's all about, our ultimate victory, what success is to us. Who here wants to be successful? Right? Everyone wants success, right? We could sell books all day long on how to be successful. Here's success right here. Put our hope completely, fully in the gift that will be revealed. We will receive it when Messiah is revealed. Because everything we hope for, this inheritance that we have, our inheritance in Yeshua is not stuff. Just want to disabuse everybody of that notion. In case you think of inheritance like, oh, okay, my parents die and maybe they left me something good or maybe they left me a bunch of junk, right? That's not what we're talking about. The inheritance in Yeshua is him. You get that, right? It's a relationship. It's knowing him. It's da'at. It's this knowledge of him forever. That's what he offers us. That's awesome. That's amazing. That should be life-changing right now. That should impact our lives today. That should impact our attitudes and our actions now, because we fully fix our hope. And so he puts these things together. He says, keep yourselves under control, meaning don't live in a way that goes against God's Torah and against God's will, but fix your hope fully on the gift you will receive. So if we fixed ourselves, our hope is completely fixed on Yeshua, then the way that we live now is going to show a lot of self-restraint. Because people, when they live in a wanton way, when they live in an immoral way, they have a saying. I mean, it's a common saying. Live like there's no tomorrow. Right? Right? Because, hey, you just got one life. You got to live it now. That's someone who doesn't have a hope they're looking forward to. You see the difference? Do you see the contrast? We don't live like there's no tomorrow. We live like there's only tomorrow. The only thing that matters is what's going to happen when Yeshua comes back. That's the only thing that matters. Now, maybe tomorrow, if he hasn't come back by tomorrow, maybe I'll have food to eat. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll have a place to live. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll have friends. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll have freedom. Maybe I won't, right? Those things, it's not that we don't want anything. We want things, and we may get them, and we may not. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately it's just going to pass. It's all going to pass. And all of our spiritual pride is going to pass. All of this exaltation, and we think we're so amazing, and we puff ourselves up, and we have this amazing estimation of ourselves that's way out of whack. It's just going to, pop like a balloon. It's gone. Because when his glory is revealed, nothing's going to compare to it. Nothing. The glory of man will be abased, completely abased. And he will be exalted. And that day he will be one. And his name, one. Echad. That's what it says. That's our hope. So he says, as people who obey God, do not let yourselves be shaped by the evil desires you used to have when you were still ignorant. Did we have those desires? Yes. And guess what? That's fine because we were ignorant. But it's not fine now. You get that? That's why we need to have compassion to people who are ignorant. We need to find out, how can we persuade them? How can we win them over? But if you say you've been won over and you know Yeshua, then you have no excuse. We're not here to judge people on the outside. We're here to look into the mirror of the Torah of freedom, as Yaakov says. And we're to see our lives and let him change us. Because our hope is where? There. It's on his return. Are we perfect now? But will we be when he gets back? Yes, because he's going to bring us to the goal. And so if we're people who are going to be brought to the goal and our whole entire hope is on that, then everything we do should be based on that. That's what he's saying here. On the contrary, following the Holy One who called you, become holy yourselves in your entire way of life. Since the Tanakh says, you are to be kadosh, because ani kadosh. Also, if you are addressing his Father, the one who judges impartially according to each person's actions, you should live out your temporary stay on earth in fear. If we're all going to stand before him, and either the tree bore fruit, if it did bear fruit, do we exalt the tree? No, because that's what trees are supposed to do. They're supposed to bear fruit. That's what they're made for. That's just what you expect. So Yeshua's going to analyze, did the tree bear fruit? Because he put the seed there. He put the water there. He made sure the soil was good. He did all the things that he was supposed to do. Did it bear fruit? And we're all going to have to give an answer to that, every single one of us. And so if we know that, we should be thinking about that. We should be living now, thinking about then. That's the wise way to live. Life is really short. It's really fleeting. A lot of times it's shorter than we expect it to be. A lot of times we tell ourselves, I got more time, I'll worry about it later. How many times do we hear people do that? Oh, I'll worry about it later. And then next thing you know, a car wreck or this or that. And you're like, where's the later? The later never comes. Put your hope in him fully now. Put your trust in him fully now. Obey him now. Depend on him now. Let him live through you now. So here's the conclusion. A few things that we can conclude. There's actually more, but I just want to leave a few points with you. The first is, in the good news, the glad tidings, the Besorah, how much room is there for our spiritual pride? There's just none. If we think there is, we don't understand it. We have to be misunderstanding it. And so if we see someone who is very spiritually proud and says that they understand the good news, I would assume they really don't understand it. That would be my assumption. Be compassionate, be humble, but I would assume they don't really understand it. That doesn't mean that I'm in some position to teach them, but that would be my assumption. Because if we start to get it, then we realize there's just nothing. There's no place for our pride. Zero. One of the things that we hear people say a lot today is, I'm okay, you're okay. Right? Or just do your best. I'm doing my best, right? I'm trying my best. Guess what? God doesn't want you to try your best. And you're not okay, and I'm not okay. He wants to fully transform us. He wants to make us alive from the dead. If you're dead, you're not okay. If you're alive, you're not dead. You see how that works? It's strange, but it's binary. I guess that's a sore subject these days, but a lot of things in life are binary. You're either alive or you're dead. If you're dead and you try harder, does that help? No. So the good news is not about us trying harder. The good news is not about us convincing ourselves that I'm okay, you're okay. Did you know that that's actually spiritual pride when we do that? People don't think of it like that. They don't think of it in those terms. Like when that attitude, we use it all the time. It's very normal in our culture. It's normative. Hey, I'm okay, you're okay. Who are we to judge anyone? You kind of live your truth, I'll live mine. That is the essence of spiritual pride. Because I'm not okay. In my trespasses, I'm dead. And if I'm alive, it's because Yeshua made me alive. Either way, I'm not okay. The only one who's okay is him, right? And so I can't try harder to do the things that I would do, because what's going to come out of my old nature is just bad stuff. It's just going to be pride and selfishness and self-centeredness. So I need him to be coming out. I need to be in him so that he's living his life through me. I'm not okay. You're not okay. And so don't try harder. Stop trying. Die to yourself. When you try harder, guess who you focus on? Yeah, who do I focus on when I try harder? Me. I really, really look in the mirror like, okay, I gotta try harder. I'm gonna do better. Like, come on, you can do better. Yeah, you in the mirror, right? That's what we do when we're trying harder. That's the essence of pride. It's not about me. It's about him. We're supposed to look to Yeshua, the author and perfecter of our faith. So if we want to die to our spiritual pride, we have to abandon these lies of I'm okay, you're okay. Or I'm trying the best I can. I do the best I can. Yeah, don't. Give it up. Turn your life over to him. Like Yeshua said, if you don't turn to God, you will die in your sins. Those are the options. Death or resurrection life. And you can't choose to resurrect yourself, so you have to receive it as a gift, right? Through trust, putting your faith in him. That brings us to our point number 3. To trust in Yeshua, we must cease trusting in ourselves. We can't do both. They're in conflict. It's really, really important, because this is why we fall into spiritual pride. We kind of say, like, I'm a hybrid, right? People have EVs and they have, ICEs, internal combustion engines. But then a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to have a hybrid. So if you have a car and it's a hybrid, is it an EV or is it an ICE? No, the reality is, here, I'll make it easy for you. Do you go to a gas station or do you plug your car in? You go to a gas station. See, the hybrid thing, it's fake. It's not really hybrid. The reality is that cars have always had batteries, like for longer than I've been alive, right? So we play this hybrid thing, but it's really one or the other. Do you plug the car in at the electric, or do you gas it up into gasoline? That's the way it is with us. We can pretend that there's some hybrid option, but there's not. We're either putting our trust completely in Yeshua, and he's the one who saves us, and he's the one who perfects us, and we look at him, and we look to him, and we worship him, and we have fellowship with him, and we have intimacy with him, and he's the one we fully hope for, and we hope in, and we can't wait till he comes back. We're ardently waiting for that moment. Or we look to ourselves, and I'm okay, and you're okay, and I really don't need him, and I just try harder. Do you get it? It's one or the other. We pretend that there's a hybrid option, but there's not. The hybrid option is that we say that we have him, but in fact, we just look to ourselves. That's the hybrid option. Now, I wasn't trying to make a statement about cars, just an analogy. And then the solution to our spiritual pride is to depend on his grace to set us free from sin and empower us to walk humbly in obedience and holiness. If I could condense down into one little sentence the whole good news, which is impossible, but if I could, at least from the results of it, that's the results of it. That's the outworking of it, right? It's all about him, but it's about what he does in us, because he glorifies himself in us and through us. Do you understand that part? So it's not about us. When we produce fruit, it's not like, wow, look at the great fruit I'm producing. It's like, no, look at my creator who's doing this. That's the point of it. That's the problem about spiritual pride, is that we start giving credit to ourselves, just like the Chihuahua with the mailman, right? We start giving credit to ourselves, something that isn't us. And then we actually undo his work, because instead of glorifying him, we're glorifying ourselves, which is in itself sin, right? And then we're back in the loop. And it's really just self-deception. So the solution is we depend on his grace. His grace sets us free from sin. And his grace, his Holy Spirit, empowers us to walk humbly, because if we don't do it humbly, we're not doing it, in obedience and holiness. And we just read that in Kepha, in 1 Peter, right? That's the way we're supposed to walk. That's how he expects us to live. And when we do that, we're not special. Like, we're just doing what he created us to do. Like, it's not special that a dog barks. Now, if your dog starts talking like me, you're like, wow, that's special, because dogs don't do that. But if a dog barks, that's just normal. Right? If your cat meows, it's normal. If someone who follows Yeshua walks humbly in obedience and holiness, that's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. That person's been raised from the dead spiritually. You would expect it. In fact, there's only a problem if they don't, right? And that's the key. The key is that we need to rely on him, and we should look for these signs in our lives, not so that we can exult in them, not so that we can think that something's going on, but so that we can know, are we evaluating ourselves in a realistic way? Because Yeshua said there's going to be this evaluation of the fruit. We're going to look at it. And maybe he gives it another year, maybe not. Right? But there will be this evaluation. And so we can already start that evaluation now. Not a judgment like, I'm good and I'm good for all times, because that's nonsense. But just, am I walking in the truth? Am I getting closer to what's real? Am I full of more love and more compassion for people? Do I have more humility than I used to? Do I think less of myself than I used to, and think more about him and of him and for him and live through him, right? Or am I going the other way, right? Which direction am I headed? We should be able to see that. We should be able to evaluate that. And that way we can have a real evaluation of what's going on. And if our attitude is that somebody is less than us and we're more than someone, it doesn't matter who it is. It can be whatever your spiritual nemesis is, right? We all have that group that we're like, oh, that group, right? Or that individual, or whatever it is. But that ends up being the way that you love the least of my brethren, you loved me, right? That ends up being the evaluation of, do we actually love Yeshua? Have we actually received his grace? With that, say Shabbat Shalom. Stand up. We'll do the Aaronic benediction.